The heavy steel door sealed shut with a sound like a coffin being nailed closed. Inside the chamber, 5 men stood blinking under the sickly glow of flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like a swarm of angry wasps. The air carried the sharp tang of antiseptic undercut by something darker, something organic and spoiled, like meat left to rot in a sealed container. The walls, painted an institutional green that had faded to the color of old bruises, seemed to breathe ever so slightly, expanding and contracting when no one was looking directly at them. Alexei, the youngest at 22, cracked his knuckles with forced bravado, his smirk not quite reaching his eyes. 30 days without sleep? Please! I stayed awake for 5 days straight during finals at university. His voice echoed oddly in the concrete space, coming back slightly distorted, as if something in the room was subtly altering the sound waves. Dmitri, the oldest at 47, didn't respond. His bloodshot eyes were fixed on the far corner where the wall met the floor, staring at what might have been a shadow, or a stain, or perhaps something pressed so impossibly flat against the surface that it was barely perceptible to human vision. His fingers twitched unconsciously, tracing patterns in the air that almost resembled sigils. The first 3 days passed in a haze of forced camaraderie and nervous energy. They played endless hands of cards, told increasingly strange jokes, and tried to ignore how the temperature in the room fluctuated unpredictably, swinging from uncomfortably warm to bone-chilling cold without warning. By the 4th day, Victor, a wiry man with haunted eyes, began his endless pacing. 10 steps forward, a sharp turn, then 10 steps back. His boots wore a visible groove in the concrete floor, the rhythm of his movements becoming a metronome counting down to something terrible. For God's sake, stop that! Boris growled, his meaty hands clenching and unclenching. The former butcher's face had taken on a sickly pallor, his normally ruddy complexion now the color of spoiled milk. Victor didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear. His pupils had dilated until his irises were nearly invisible, and his lips moved constantly, forming words that made the air around him vibrate strangely. On the 7th night, when the overhead lights dimmed to simulate nighttime, though no one could truly sleep, the whispers began. Not from the men this time, but from the walls themselves. The scientists monitoring from behind the one-way mirror heard nothing unusual through their headphones, the audio equipment registering only the expected static of an empty channel. But inside the chamber, the men heard it clearly, a voice threading between their words, speaking in a language that none of them recognized yet somehow understood on a primal level. It spoke of ancient things, of spaces between spaces, of a hunger that had existed before light. By the 9th day, Alexei's carefully constructed bravado shattered. He wasn't screaming in pain or fear, but in horrified recognition, as if he'd suddenly remembered something terrible that had been hidden from him. He clawed at the observation mirror with enough force to snap his fingernails, leaving bloody smears on the glass. "They're inside us!" he shrieked, his voice breaking. "They've always been inside us! In the spaces between our thoughts!" The cameras showed nothing out of the ordinary. Just 5 men. Just 5. Day 12 brought the writing. It appeared overnight, not carved or painted, but somehow grown into the concrete itself. Thin black tendrils, glistening with something that wasn't quite liquid, pushed through the wall's surface, forming words that seemed to squirm when looked at directly. The letters spelled out a message that made Leonid, the quietest of the group, burst into hysterical laughter, a wet, guttural sound that contained too many tones to be human. "We were here before you," the wall declared in jagged, pulsing script. Leonid traced the letters with trembling fingers, his laughter shifting into something that might have been a sob or perhaps a prayer in a language that hurt the ears. On the 15th day, Dmitri calmly peeled his face off. Not metaphorically, with methodical precision, his fingernails dug beneath the skin at his jaw and pulled upward in one slow, inexorable motion. The flesh came away with a sound like tearing parchment, revealing nothing. Just an impossible void where his features should have been. The others watched in silence. No one screamed. "Better," said the thing wearing Dmitri's muscles, its voice layered with harmonics no human throat could produce. "Now I can breathe properly." The void where his face had been pulsed rhythmically, as if inhaling and exhaling something other than air. By day 20, only Victor remained recognizably human. He sat cross-legged in the exact center of the room, rocking gently, his arms wrapped around his knees like a child trying to comfort itself. The microphones picked up two distinct voices, his own, and something else. Something that answered from inside his ribcage, its words vibrating through his bones. The scientists watching through the observation window should have terminated the experiment then. They didn't. Their notes from that day, later recovered, showed increasing erratic behavior, misspelled words, passages written backwards, and one chilling line repeated 17 times. "We must see how it ends." On the 30th morning, the chamber door opened with a hiss of releasing pressure. Victor stepped out, his movements jerky and unnatural. His skin had gone translucent, stretched tight over bones that bent in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. When the lead scientist reached for him, Victor's jaw unhinged with a wet pop, splitting down to his sternum to reveal rows of needle-like teeth and a voice that came from everywhere at once. "You thought this was an experiment?" the thing inside Victor asked, its words carrying the weight of centuries. Behind it, the chamber door creaked shut of its own accord. From inside came the sound of 5 familiar voices beginning to scream in perfect, harmonic unison. Later examination of the security footage revealed disturbing gaps, exactly 6 minutes and 6 seconds missing from each night's recording between 3:33 and 3:39 a.m. When the cameras reactivated, the men were never in the same positions. One was always facing the corner in a posture that suggested something far from human. The mirror's reflection consistently showed 7 figures where there should have been 5, the extras moving with a liquid grace that defied physics. Dr. Petrov's personal notes, discovered in his ransacked office, told the rest of the story. His final entries described his wife's disturbing behavior. She had stopped blinking entirely, and when she spoke, her voice contained echoes. His young daughter drew endless pictures of the chamber, always with 8 figures inside, the extras rendered in disturbing detail despite the child having never seen inside the test area. The ventilation system, it was discovered, hadn't been pumping in stimulants at all. The canisters were filled with something else entirely, a substance that matched no known chemical compound and seemed to shift under microscopic examination. The official documents listed this as the 13th iteration of the experiment. Records of the first 12 test groups were incomplete, but what remained suggested none had been terminated. They were simply unaccounted for. Somewhere in the facility's labyrinthine sublevels. The final medical report on Victor noted his organs had been rearranged with surgical precision. His ribs formed a perfect geometric cage around lungs that didn't match his blood type. Most disturbing were the X-rays, which showed something moving behind his sternum, something that cast its own shadow on the film. Now, as you read this alone in the glow of your screen, take a moment to notice the quality of the silence around you. Notice how the shadows in your room don't quite align with the light sources, how they seem just a bit darker than they should be. That persistent itch between your shoulder blades isn't going away, it's getting worse, spreading slowly up your neck. Because they're learning from you. Adapting to you. Studying the way your pupils dilate when you read certain words. The like button pulses rhythmically now, matching no discernible pattern but somehow syncing with your heartbeat. The comments section occasionally displays names you don't recognize, messages that disappear when you try to focus on them. And the subscribe button? You could swear it wasn't there when you first started reading. The color is wrong somehow, a shade of red that hurts your eyes if you look too long. But it's there now. Waiting. Just like them. Just like the thing standing behind you right now, the one whose breath you can almost feel on the back of your neck. Don't turn around. Not yet. Let's see how long you can last before you finally look. Before you finally understand what's really been reading along with you this whole time. The experiment continues. You're part of it now. Welcome to day 1.